Yeah, I'm calling BS on the whole industry if you guys are shoving ginger into your horse's private parts. Hey bitch, and welcome back to me talking about people I motherfucking hate, bitch. I feel it. I feel the keyboard warriors just getting ready to type their little feelings. Just wait, just hear me out, okay, bitch? You can be angry. I want to hear everyone's opinions. I want everyone to comment their thoughts below. All I ask is that you watch this video in its entirety before you comment. Hot take, as I always have, saddle seat is really sus, girl. Like, what the fuck? What's going on? This video was inevitable. It was going to happen. Everyone has been bothering me for the last 5 years to do a video on saddle seat. And I have always said, no bitch, I'm not gonna do a video on saddle seat until I learn enough about it to make an educated opinion. I am not going to sit here and say that saddle seat needs to be completely eradicated, but I am gonna give you guys some advice if you want to keep your sport, because the equestrian world is definitely moving farther and farther away from these abusive practices. Before I get into this video though, I want to say a massive thank you to Link Equestrian for sponsoring this, which is my personal company, Humble. We actually have launched a few new designs, you guys, and remember that if you buy anything from Link Equestrian, definitely post photos tagging us. We repost everything and I shout them out in my YouTube videos now at the end of each video. So definitely head over to Link Equestrian if you're interested in any of those products. But let's get to it. So if you're unfamiliar with what saddle seat is, it's basically this. Yeah, I don't really know how else to describe it. I mean, because it looks fucking weird. I don't know how else to describe it, seriously. It just looks weird. A lot of people confuse saddle seat riding with big lick, which I've made several videos about big lick. They typically use Tennessee walking horses. They soar them. They, nail these ridiculous pads onto their feet and just blocks. It's awful. Big lick is 150% abusive. Everyone who partakes in big lick is just evil. Evil, evil, evil. So this is not to be confused with big lick. However, girl, I don't think any of you guys who participate in saddle seat are that much better, to be honest. I mean, if I'm just gonna go ahead and stir the pot right out of the gate, that's my opinion. I honestly feel really manipulated because for a while I was like, oh yeah, saddle seat's not really that bad. The whole community talks about how they get such a bad rep because people confuse saddle seat and big lick together, which I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but to be honest, that's not why you guys get so much hate, and you guys know it. And honestly, I think it's really manipulative that the saddle seat industry just blows off all of the criticism they get by saying that people are confusing them with big lick when they're not. Like, you guys definitely have your own issues and your own problems, and trust me, I'm gonna open that can of worms in this video, girl, so sit tight. I'm gonna air your dirty laundry out to the whole world, and we know it. I think the reason why I'm so heated right now is because the saddlebred saddle seat people are just really manipulative. And I see them all over the internet constantly downplaying what's going on within their sport. Even on my own channel, I did a poll on my channel, and this is not to say that any of these people, any of you guys were partaking in the saddle seat industry, but this just goes to show you how manipulative the industry is, because a lot of people seem to believe the same thing that I once did, which was that saddle seat's not abusive, it depends on the horse, it depends depends on the rider. All sports have abusive practices within them, whatever, like all that bullshit rhetoric that they like to throw out there to make it sound a little bit better. If your sport has the amount of issues that we're going to talk about that's involved with saddle seat, then honestly, I just think there's a problem with your sport. You guys either need to make some serious changes to your sport, or it just needs to stop if you're not willing to do that, because the animal's health and welfare comes first. I don't tolerate any of that on this channel, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything just because I'm afraid that I'm going to be attacked by the mob of saddle seat, saddlebred riders, okay? Which I know I'm going to, by the way. So saddle seat riding involves saddlebred horses, which are beautiful horses, and they are gaited. They do move very uniquely. This is a natural movement for a saddlebred horse. And a lot of people who ride saddlebred horses ride them in what's called saddle seat competitions. And they're widely popular. There's plenty of people who support this and go to these shows, and you can kind of understand, if you're not within the industry, just looking at this, why people think there's some type of abuse going on behind the scenes. One thing I want to get out of the way right off the bat is that this is the way a natural saddlebred moves and carries their body. I want people to know that right out of the gate, because anybody who's gonna come to me and say, but Raleigh, this is natural and the way they're moving right here is natural. No, it's not. I actually took the time to spend time around saddlebred horses that are not used for saddle seat competitions, and they do not move like this. Although they do move somewhat like that, this is heavily exaggerated, just like Big Lick. Not to the extent that Big Lick is exaggerated, but it's definitely exaggerated, and we're gonna get into why. Something that you'll see quite often is people who are not involved in the industry tend to have obviously unbiased opinions. When they look at it, they're like, that definitely looks kind of uncomfortable, and that the horse is not enjoying that, and that there's something going on. But anytime you see somebody that's involved in the industry, you can tell they have a bit of a biased opinion on the matter, because they're like, well, the horse naturally moves like that, it doesn't hurt the horse, whatever the fuck. And it's the same argument perpetuated over and over again by different people. So there are a few reasons why people think saddle seat is abusive, and before I tell you my opinion on each matter, I want to give the saddle seat community an opportunity to defend themselves. So when I was communicating with some people in the saddle seat industry, pretty much every single person referenced this article, which I found to be like kind of strange. Leslie Potter is apparently a saddle seat rider that rode saddle seat for most of her life. And this is, again, an article referenced to me by multiple people as to why saddle seat's not abusive. Leslie says, I just have to put this out there up front, because every time an image of a horse picking up its high feet appears somewhere on the internet, someone will insist that the horse is being sored. As I understand it, sored horses have noticeable head bobs. Lots of head and neck movement is expected at the running walk, at trot. It's evidence that the horse is lame. If soaring could make a horse's trot higher, reiners stop better, jumpers jump higher, or dressage horses pee off correctly, it would be a problem in every discipline, but it happens to be a disturbing method that only works to get a specific result on specific type of horses. So please stop accusing trotting horse trainers of soaring. They aren't doing it. Okay, Leslie, I'm gonna be totally fucking honest. I have no idea what the fuck you just said. Like, what does that even mean? If soaring could make horses trot higher, reiners stop better, jumpers jump higher, or dressage horses pee off correctly, it would be a problem in every discipline? But you're not saying that it's not within your discipline. Like, there is legitimate evidence that horses in the Big Lick community are sored. on a very regular basis. Vets even write off on horses that are sored as if they're not being sored.
Every trainer sored horses. I mean, every trainer sored horses. I mean, you have to. I mean, there's judges being paid, a lot of the DQPs, and that's the inspectors are being paid to let horses through.
Whether saddle seat horses are sored or not is kind of up for debate. I personally don't really think that they're sored because the natural gait of the horse looks like this, and then the show gait looks like this. I honestly just believe that the reason they move in such an exaggerated way is because of the shoeing, the pads that are placed on their feet, the weight that's added to the shoe. And I'm going to get into that more in depth in a second because that's another big issue within the saddle seat community is the shoeing aspect. I don't think saddle seat horses are sored, but that's not to say it doesn't happen. And that's not to say that people shouldn't be a little wary and definitely look out for that. But also that definitely doesn't disprove anything. And I don't even know what the fuck you just said, Leslie. So let's move on. Leslie goes on to say the second most common comment on saddle seat horses, specifically saddlebreds, is that their tails are broken. They aren't. A veterinarian performs a relatively simple surgery where 2 small incisions are made to the muscle on the underside of the tail. When the tail is put in a set that holds it upright, so it heals and has higher carriage. This can actually be done without surgery, but it takes a lot of time and patience to manually stretch the tail over time. Either way, the horse can swish their tails. Please read that again. They can swish their tails. The muscles still work. People refuse to believe this. Girl, again, I don't know what the fuck you're saying because as it says on the American Veterinary Medical Association website, nicking is sometimes performed on breeds, saddlebreds, for which show standards reward the tail being carried erect rather than lying flat. The practice may have developed for the same reason as docking, to keep the tail clear of a harness. However, it is now performed only for showing or cosmetic reasons. Let's say that again, only for showing or cosmetic reasons. Nicking involves an incision, and in rare cases, serious or fatal complications have been reported due to infections resulting in peritonitis. As nicked tails will naturally settle back into a relaxed position, these horses often wear tail sets to hold the tail erect. While wearing this equipment, horse needs to be stabled individually. Veterinary objections to this procedure can be found in publications as early as 1855. It is a surgical operation, but no respectable veterinarian would recommend it. Did you catch that? Leslie, tail nicking is very common within the saddlebred, saddle seat industry, and it's where they go in and they cut the tendons within the tail to cause the horse's tail to stand more upright. And then they also put this god-awful contraption on the back of a horse, which literally looks like it belongs in someone's dungeon somewhere. Like, this looks like a fucking torture device.
There we go. Once it's up here, you're going to take the straps and pull them to this D-ring up here. And once you get the tail set, you get the tail in, you have to strap it down. Because if they decide to lift their tail up and move it, that's when you're going to have tails become crooked from sitting out of their set. Here out, and you slide this strap through to the other side, and then the other strap goes through to the other side.
What is, like, I don't even, like, what? The fact that this is normalized within the industry to, like, strap this torture-looking device onto your horse where you're, like, forcing the tail to stay in a specific position to look good, and you have to consistently do this to keep the tail looking like that, I mean, that's really fucking weird. That's really weird. Whoever thought of this as like a really beautiful looking thing is demonic and satanic. Not to mention that tail nicking is just 100% cosmetic. There's no reason to do this, and there are legitimate health complications associated with nicking tails. Peritonitis is fatal in some cases. In a recent group discussion among ACVIM diplomats, it was clear that an alarmingly high number of cases they see involve complications from tail alterations, which are medical procedures done to solely change the function and position, essentially the appearance of the tail, usually done for the show ring. The most common tail alteration procedures are numbing the tail, nicking one of its tendons, or amputating its tip. But their consequences are far more than just cosmetic. Complications resulting from these procedures can cause permanent disfigurement or disability that in some cases leads to death. Even without complications, tail alteration is cruel because it changes the way a horse can use its tail and sometimes prevents him from using it at all. Tail function is quite important for an equine well-being. So no, Leslie, going back to what you were saying, tail nicking is a serious issue. It goes way beyond just, oh, a little cosmetic procedure that doesn't even bother the horse or affect the horse at all, which, first of all, not only is that a lie, and there are serious health complications associated with doing something so stupid, but it's also just dumb. I mean, this is a cosmetic procedure, and you're openly admitting that there's no reason to do it to the animal, so, like, why is this a part of your sport? Leslie goes on. I don't think tail setting causes serious pain or lasting damage, but come on, saddlebred world. Literally everyone else in the horse world looks at those tail sets and sees a symptom of equine abuse for vanity's sake. It doesn't matter that it's not abusive. I mean, that's definitely up for debate, Leslie. I don't know what the fuck. But perception is reality. Just ban set tails. No one is going to leave the breed because horse tailbones aren't sticking straight up in the air anymore. I would appreciate it if you guys would actually acknowledge that yes, doing all of the fucked up shit that you guys do to the horse tails by nicking them and setting them and all of this just disgusting stuff, it definitely is abusive and it definitely does cause problems. I mean, the horse's tail is literally connected to their spinal cord. You're literally forcing a part of their body in an unnatural position for long periods of time. It's restricting the movement of the tail. It fucks up the whole musculoskeletal system. She goes on to say tail sets are technically illegal for Morgans and Arabians, and judges are supposed to penalize the appearance of a set tail. Okay, then why is it not illegal for like all breeds? I don't understand why this is still around and why people are defending it. Weighted padded shoes are another big drag on the sport. In my opinion, I don't think they're inherently cruel. I mean, Leslie, come on, like, have some proper grammar, dude. Don't put a period in the middle of a sentence. Proportional to the horse's weight, a saddlebred show shoe is lighter than the average sneaker to you. I mean, you don't know that. The real problem with show shoes, again, in my opinion, is that you can't really turn a horse out when he's wearing them. The risk is too high. If he gets running around, he'll throw that heavy shoe and potentially take a chunk of hoof wall with it. So the horse generally stay stalled during show season when they aren't being worked. So this was another big complaint, is that a lot of the saddlebred horses, because they've got these ridiculously heavy shoes on their feet, they stay stalled close to 24 hours of the day, only taken out when they're being worked, which Leslie literally just admitted to, but I'll get into it in just a second. Now, top-level show horses in any discipline aren't living out in a vast field 24/7, but at least if your show horse is wearing unweighted shoes, you have the option of giving him a couple of hours in paddock, and that's better than nothing. Thing is, these horses are natural high steppers. If weighted shoes and stacked pads were outlawed across the board, you'd get to see the movement in the show ring, and no one would be at a disadvantage if everyone was subjected to those rules. Why can't we have that? Okay, so I agree with Leslie here. I agree that padded shoes and stacked shoes, weighted shoes should all be banned. No matter what horse sport you're in. Something I'm going to include right here is a saddlebred farrier who regularly shoes only saddlebred horses is talking about the weight of the shoes and how the weight of the shoe actually affects the way that the horse moves, which basically goes against what other saddlebred people say by saying that the pads and the weighted shoes don't do anything to the horse. They're not the same as the Tennessee walking horse. Here's the thing. Tennessee walking horses have those big ridiculous shoes to give them a more exaggerated gait. It's the same thing with saddlebred horses. They've got these weighted shoes to make their gait more exaggerated in the show ring. And that's something that this farrier openly talks about.
On some of these saddlebreds, I have to use what we call wedge pads to alter their natural angles. And again, the emphasis is on their motion and how they use themselves and how they perform. There seems to always have been a myth about the saddlebred that they're to be shod heavily, and that's not necessarily true. Some do. Some require that kind of weight, others don't. Most of the ones that I've come across over the years have not required a lot of weight, a lot of length. But again, some do. Some are shod very light. Some are shod a little heavier, some are shod very heavy. Fortunately, I haven't come across ponies that I've had to really load up and put a bunch of weight on.
I mean, girl, when your farrier is actively saying that they increase the weight of the shoes dependent upon the performance of the horse, like, that's pretty good evidence that you guys are only shoeing the horses this way to get an exaggerated gait. And in my opinion, that's not ethical. Something that people don't seem to remember is that saddlebred horses are still horses. They still have the exact same anatomy as other horses. And anybody who says that the saddlebred shoes and toes have to stay long on those horses is just lying. Because something that I, again, wanted to point out is these are a bunch of saddlebred horses that are doing normal riding with normal feet in dressage. And they are moving like normal horses. I'm sorry, but you can't really defend saddle seat riding when you can clearly see the difference in saddlebred horses dependent upon any other sport that they choose to do versus saddle seat. I mean, they just look actively uncomfortable in saddle seat riding. These saddlebred horses that are eventing look vastly more comfortable than how they look when they do saddle seat. I mean, you cannot convince me that these horses move like this naturally when there's video evidence of these same horses, the same breed in other disciplines moving way more normal. I could sit there and say that it's because the riders sit so far back on the horse backs, which is another thing that's really bad. Everyone knows that past the 18th vertebrae in the horse's back, you should not have a saddle seated there, and you shouldn't be seated there on what's called the floating ribs. This causes immense discomfort for the horse. I mean, you got their kidneys right there. It's just so painful to have weight that far back on a horse's back, and it also causes a lot of saddle seat horses to hollow out over time when they're consistently moving this way. Warning, the following topic is disturbing and graphic. Click away if you're squeamish or can't handle adult content. The worst thing that I've read so far about the saddle seat industry, apart from these horses just being horribly mistreated, they get zero turnout time, their bodies are mutilated, the riders are riding incorrectly, putting immense pressure on them, hollowing them out, they look stressed. I mean, they're carrying a ton of weight on their feet. It's the gingering. I don't know, do any of you guys know what horse gingering is? Because let me tell you, I had no fucking idea until I looked into this industry, and this is pretty horrific. Gingering, or gingering the tail, is the practice of making a horse carry its tail high and to a lesser extent encourage it to move in a lively fashion by applying an irritant such as raw ginger to its anus or vulva. For the halter horses in the Arabian and American saddlebred breeds, high tail carriage and animation are desired traits. However, nearly all horse show sanctioning organizations in the US explicitly forbid gingering and have the authority to disqualify a horse treated in this way. While some areas may be less rigorous about enforcing the rule, tests such as ginger swabbing may be done to detect the presence of ginger in the anus. While it's not entirely reliable, concerns of detecting by animal tests has led to some horse handlers placing the irritant in the vagina of the horse if it's a mare. A modern veterinary dictionary notes that vaginal placement is more effective than anal insertion because the irritant is likely to remain in place longer, and concludes gingering would be considered to be an act of cruelty in any civilized community. So gingering is essentially a way of soaring a horse, just vaginally or anally. What's crazy is no one in the saddlebred industry is addressing this. Like, this is not a claim that anybody addresses at any point. And to be honest, I think it's probably because it's still done. I mean, there's very little ways to detect this, and as we know about every industry, there are veterinarians that are shady that write off on people who actively abuse and sore their animals. I mean, why do you think there are still big lick shows that veterinarians still attend and still clear those horses that are obviously sored? So I think by them saying that we have vets that test our horses at every show, that doesn't really hold any merit, because there are veterinarians that sign off on pretty much every shady practice at any show if they're paid to do that. Also, this is barbaric, and the fact that I've only ever seen this happen in the American saddlebred saddle seat industry. I'm not saying it doesn't happen anywhere else, but this was literally the first time I ever heard of this. And trust me, I've looked into some pretty awful horse sports. The fact that I found this to be part of the saddlebred industry, and I've even seen some saddlebred people openly admitting to doing this to their animals, yeah, I'm calling BS on the whole industry if you guys are shoving ginger into your horse's private parts. And, you know, to be honest, I'm not even gonna get into what bits they're riding in, because that's just obvious. So, that is my take on saddle seat riding, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this dissection. This is, again, just my opinion. Comment your thoughts and your feelings below. If you liked this video, hit the like button, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts and opinions. And if you're a saddle seat person, you think I got my facts wrong, or you want to contradict something I'm saying, I'd love to know your thoughts. Leave it down below. Again, don't forget to check out Link Equestrian, but I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!